What should you expect for your C-section? Well, I had a planned and an unplanned C-section, and even though they were a little bit different from each other, there were some pretty similar experiences that we're going to talk about today. So that way, if you are planning to have a C-section, or if you end up having, an unexpected C-section, you'll know exactly what to expect. But if we haven't hung out before, my name is Brianna. I'm a fellow mom, and here we talk all about money and mom life from moms for moms. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. So, as I mentioned, our question today is what to expect when you're having a C-section. You are having surgery. And what always happens when we have surgery, we have to clean the area and make sure that it all stays nice and, clean and sanitized. They will be using some pretty harsh sterilization chemicals around your abdomen as well as other parts of your body. With my first C-section, within a couple of days, I ended up breaking out with hives all the way around my abdomen. I could not figure out why in the world I had hives, and I am allergic to latex, so I thought, well, maybe it had to do with like the bandaging that they use, and I spent days just being incredibly miserable with intense itching. So when I was prepping for my next surgery, I was talking with the nurse and she was asking me about allergies. And through some questioning, she was able to identify that the type of sterilizing agent that they used for the C-section around my abdomen, I was intensely allergic to. So they do have a much more mild sterilizing agent that they use on other parts of your body that they could use on my abdomen instead. So if you do find that you have really sensitive skin, that might be something that you may want to mention or discuss with your medical team prior to your C-section so you're not writhing in hives several days after your surgery like I was. So what can you expect to happen when they're going to make an incision right across your abdomen? If you've ever had something happen to your head and you had to have like a gouge wound stapled or anything like that, they shave it. So if you haven't done this prior to heading to the hospital, just be aware that this will occur once you're there. I remember showing up for my planned C-section and the nurse was, prepping me for surgery, and she, grabbed a razor and she was like, "Oh, did someone already come in and do this?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Oh, did they tell you to do this prior to, your surgery prep?" And I was like, "No." So I was just internally so incredibly grateful that I had thought about this ahead of time to know what I wanted to take care of on my own. Now, outside of, the surgery prep, you are also going to have an epidural. I mean, it's major surgery here. So you can expect, just like if you were going to go and have a natural labor, to have that very same epidural experience prior to having your C-section surgery. Now, because you're having a C-section, which is a major surgery, you are going to have a catheter inserted, and you will probably be in bed for a good, portion of time until you're allowed or encouraged to get up and walk. In order to do that, you will need to have your catheter removed. Not a medical provider, and your hospital could be very different, but I found it extremely challenging to be able to pee after my catheter was removed. Now, I do think that I spent that first day in bed. I don't think I was encouraged to get up and walk right away. I think I did have like a 24-hour period where I had my C-section early in the morning, and then it was like the next day where I was encouraged to get up, because I remember that my in-laws came to visit us in the hospital. And when you have a catheter in, let me just say that, at least in my experience, you cannot tell when your bladder is full and you cannot tell when your bladder is empty. It just happens. And I remember the nurse coming in to check on me while my in-laws were there. And, the pee bag is hanging over the side of the bed so that way they can check and, change things as needed. And she said, "Oh, you just peed." And me sitting there, just having given birth, like, your whole level of shame and embarrassment is completely different after going through that experience. And I just remember thinking, I'm not even embarrassed about that while my in-laws were sitting in the room visiting us. So just be aware that you are going to be having that experience, and that may go into the decision of how quickly you may want to invite guests into your hospital room. Let's talk about what happens after that catheter is removed. Because, like I said, I had no idea if I was actually had to pee or not pee, or how full my bladder was, or if it was empty or what. So, once you have your catheter removed, you will need to pee before you're able to leave the hospital. And I was so shocked both times. I don't know why I was shocked the second time that just how challenging it is to pee once you have a catheter removed. I'm sure that there's probably damage and bruising done down there, but one of the things that was so incredibly helpful that both of the nurses tried to kind of coach me through was the fact, like, make sure you have, running water turned on. Make sure you put your hand in warm water. Usually the toilet is right next to the sink. Another thing that our nurse had said is that it actually helped to have a straw to blow through the straw while you're trying to pee. And as soon as I was, able to remember and how to go pee that first time, everything after that was totally fine. The other thing that you should be aware of is the pain associated with your major surgery. My hospital, and of course this could be very dependent on how you are doing medically, they very quickly removed me from pain medication and then put me on over-the-counter medication to make sure that I was responding while I was still there in the hospital before sending me home. And the type of medication they put me on was a variation of Tylenol and ibuprofen. So be aware that even though you're having major surgery, you may still have very minor considered like medication to deal with the pain. Even though I had like minor, and I say minor because it is available over the counter, it still did a really good job in managing my pain. But the biggest thing that I would say that was super incredibly helpful is that I was very much encouraged to be careful not to laugh or cough or sneeze, because all of that jarring movement that's happening down there in your abdomen can be very disturbing to the incision that you just had. There is a tightness that appears like almost like you can't fully stand up very straight. I was highly encouraged too that if I was going to need to move, I would press a pillow against my abdomen as I got in and out of bed as I'm making my recovery over the next couple of days. And just in case any event came that I needed to sneeze or cough or giggle or chuckle, because all of that created that like tugging, jarring feeling that did not feel very comfortable on my incision. One of the things that I did find super helpful on my second C-section was my hospital provided me a C-section support band. And I was a little surprised on my second repeat C-section that they didn't provide this to me on my first, considering I, had my delivery at the same hospital. The band basically wraps around your belly and then Velcros tightly to kind of help keep everything stabilized as you walk and move around. Now, if you're not sure if your hospital will be providing this as an amenity, you can find these online. I'll link one below for you. But if you decide to keep it in the box, you may actually end up being able to return it if you end up not using it because your hospital provides you one. I did find this incredibly helpful, and I kind of wish that I had had one with my first, because it just allowed me that a little bit more mobility because I didn't have to carry a pillow everywhere I went. Now, while you're at the hospital, they are going to dress your wound and make sure that you're healing properly. But one thing to just keep in mind is after you go home, you may experience some oozing or just some extra fluid that comes out of your, incision. And one of the things that the nurses told me was to actually put a liner over my incision, not only because it protects my abdomen and my incision from, my pants laying over top my scar, but it actually helped to also absorb a little of that like oozing fluid that was starting to protrude as part of the healing process. Now, they also did tell me some signs to look out for to make sure that I would not get an infection, or if I thought that I might potentially start developing an infection, how to address that. And they were really great in that they gave me like a follow-up nurse helpline that I did end up calling with my second C-section, because I was just like, this does not look quite normal, especially in compared to my first C-section, and is this infected? Is this normal? Is this okay? And after my conversation with the nurse, she very clearly was like, okay, you're not experiencing these infection symptoms, sound like you're healing just fine. And I did have follow-up appointments with my doctor, who again looked at it and evaluated me. So make sure you do reach out to your nurses should you have any concerns about how your incision is healing. Now, if you end up having a C-section, I would love it if you would drop your tips or suggestions or even your funny stories down in the comments below and let us know if there's anything else that helped you prepare for your C-section. But now that you know what to expect for a C-section, you may want to know what to expect after your baby is born, which is why I recommend watching this episode next. But until we hang out again, I hope you create a home your heart loves.